I never understood how my ex-husband was able to manipulate me so hard in court until I found out that my therapist was secretly coaching him to use my trauma against me in the custody battle. I was sitting in Dr. Martinez, my therapist's, waiting room when I accidentally saw my ex-husband's name in his appointment book. Declan Polk, the same man who cheated on me and was now fighting me for custody of our daughter. My stomach dropped as I stared at that handwriting because suddenly everything made sense. Every time I told Dr. Martinez about my abandonment issues from childhood, Declan would show up the next day talking about how I was just like my father who left. Every time I discussed my anxiety about being seen as an unfit mother, Declan's lawyer would attack exactly that in court the following week. I had been paying someone to help me heal while he was secretly feeding my vulnerabilities to the person who hurt me most. When Dr. Martinez came back from his phone call, I asked him directly about Declan being his patient. He got this look on his face like a deer caught in headlights before quickly saying he couldn't discuss other patients due to confidentiality. Then he started redirecting the conversation to my paranoid thinking patterns. After that session, I went home and started documenting everything. I made a timeline of every topic I discussed in therapy and compared it to Declan's accusations. The correlation was terrifying. I told Dr. Martinez about being triggered by the phrase, "you're overreacting," and Declan started using it constantly during our custody exchanges. I mentioned my fear of Rosie seeing me cry, and suddenly Declan said horrible things to me during all the pickups, so Rosie could see my face as I broke down. I even tested it by telling Dr. Martinez a fake story about being afraid of dogs, and within days, Declan started bringing his girlfriend's massive German Shepherd to our meetings. That's when I knew for certain that my therapist was betraying me. I started researching Dr. Martinez online and discovered something that made my blood run cold. His wife Helen was a family court mediator, and she had mediated 2 of my custody sessions. Both times I lost significant custody time, and both times she recommended continued therapy with her husband for co-parenting improvement. When I checked my insurance records, I found something even worse. Declan had been attending family consultation sessions with Dr. Martinez that I never knew existed. My insurance was paying for my abuser to get coaching on how to manipulate me better. I felt sick knowing that every breakthrough I thought I was making in therapy was actually making my situation worse. I was literally paying for my own psychological torture. Then I got a bit of hope. I met another woman named Michelle in the courthouse waiting area during my next custody hearing, and something about her seemed familiar. We started talking, and I discovered she was also seeing Dr. Martinez and having similar problems with her ex knowing therapy details. Michelle told me her ex started using her childhood trauma against her in court, and only Dr. Martinez knew those details. I collected billing records showing the consultation sessions and court transcripts proving the correlation between therapy topics and legal attacks. Michelle did the same with her case. We found a third woman through online divorce support groups who had the exact same pattern with Dr. Martinez. 3 families being systematically manipulated by the same couple. The evidence was overwhelming, but I knew confronting Dr. Martinez was dangerous because he could retaliate by documenting my behavior as paranoid or unstable. During my next session, I brought all the evidence with me. I spread the billing records and timeline correlations across his coffee table while he watched in silence. His face went completely white when he saw how much I had documented. I told him I knew about the consultation sessions with Declan and his wife's involvement in my mediation hearings. I said I would file complaints with the licensing board and go public unless he told me exactly what was happening. That's when he finally broke down and admitted everything. He said it started small with just helping a few fathers win for once, but it grew into something bigger. He and his wife had been running this operation for 2 years, targeting women who seemed emotionally unstable during initial consultations. He admitted to teaching Declan exactly which buttons to push and when to push them for maximum impact. But then his expression changed and he started threatening me. He said he had been documenting my confrontational behavior and paranoid tendencies as insurance against exactly this situation. He pulled out a thick file with notes about my pressure points and told me he would recommend supervised visitation only if I reported him. He said he could make me look so unstable that I would lose Rosie completely. I drove home from Dr. Martinez's office with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The evidence folder sat on the passenger seat, but I couldn't stop glancing at it, wondering if I'd made everything worse by confronting him. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Angela asking how therapy went. I pulled over to call her, needing someone to talk to about what just happened. Angela listened as I explained the confrontation, but her questions made me second-guess myself. She asked if I was sure about the timeline correlations, if maybe I was reading too much into coincidences. Her voice had that careful tone people use when they think you're being paranoid. By the time we hung up, I was doubting my own memory of what Dr. Martinez had admitted. Another text came through from Declan about tomorrow's custody exchange. He wrote about hoping I was working on my emotional regulation, using the exact therapeutic language Dr. Martinez always emphasized. My stomach dropped. Declan had never used phrases like that before today. He was already implementing whatever new strategy they'd discussed. I checked my insurance portal on my phone and found a new entry. Dr. Martinez had already submitted a treatment update for today's session, documenting increased paranoid ideation and confrontational behavior. The timestamp showed he'd filed it within minutes of me leaving his office. My next appointment was in 48 hours, but now I couldn't attend without seeming to confirm his retaliation narrative. Canceling last minute would look like avoidance behavior, exactly what he'd use against me. I called Michelle to coordinate our next steps, but she sounded different, distant. She asked if I'd considered that maybe Dr. Martinez was just trying to help, that confronting him might have been premature. When I pressed her about our plan to file complaints together, she went quiet before saying she needed time to think. Something had changed since our last conversation. That evening, after Rosie fell asleep, I sat at my kitchen table documenting everything. I created a detailed timeline showing the systematic nature of the manipulation, cross-referencing therapy dates with custody attacks. My phone rang, displaying my nursing supervisor's number. She wanted to discuss concerning reports about personal stress affecting my professional judgment. Someone had made a professional courtesy call to my workplace about my mental state. My phone buzzed again. Declan's text said he needed to move up tomorrow's custody exchange to tonight due to my current emotional state. The phrasing matched Dr. Martinez's exact words about my triggers. I had no choice but to agree, not wanting to seem uncooperative. When Declan arrived, Rosie ran to hug me goodbye. She whispered that Daddy said I might need to talk to someone about my worried feelings feelings. My heart broke hearing therapeutic language coming from my 5-year-old. After they left, I found a business card in Rosie's backpack for a different therapist, with a note saying, "In case mommy needs help." The therapist specialized in family crisis intervention. My phone rang again. This time it was my mother, expressing concern about my paranoid thoughts regarding Rosie's doctors. I'd never told her anything about Dr. Martinez or my suspicions. Someone had reached out to her with information I'd only shared in therapy. The next morning, I started the process of filing a complaint with the state licensing board. The online forms required immediate documentation of harm and warned the review process would take 6 to 8 weeks. By then, my custody case would be decided. I printed the forms anyway, filling them out between patients at work. My family doctor called, saying she'd received a professional consultation request about my mental health status. A colleague had contacted her with workplace safety concerns. She sounded hesitant when I asked about refilling my anxiety medication, suggesting I might want to establish care with a psychiatrist first. Another door closing. Michelle finally returned my calls, but only to admit the truth. Declan had offered to pay for her son's private school tuition if she stopped enabling my delusions. She apologized, but said she couldn't afford to turn down that kind of help. I realized I'd lost my only ally who understood what was happening. A letter arrived from my custody attorney. He was returning my retainer check, citing a conflict of interest that hadn't existed the previous week. No explanation, just my money back and a list of other attorneys in town. I started calling them, but 3 different lawyers mentioned they'd already received calls about my treatment resistance and potential danger to my child. They all used identical language in their polite refusals. The daycare director scheduled a meeting for the following week to discuss concerning statements Rosie had made about our home environment. She mentioned speaking with Dr. Martinez about child development and stress indicators. My daughter's entire support network was being turned against me. I began to understand the scope of what was happening. Dr. Martinez was using professional referral networks to systematically isolate me from any mental health support. Every therapist, every doctor, every professional who might help me was being poisoned against me before I could even reach out. My healing network had become a weapon aimed at my destruction. At work, my colleagues started treating me differently. Hushed conversations stopped when I entered the break room. My charge nurse mentioned a consultation about stress levels affecting patient care. Someone suggested I might benefit from taking some time off to focus on my personal situation. The walls were closing in from every direction. Declan filed a motion for increased custody time through mediation, citing professional concerns about my deteriorating mental health. The filing included statements from multiple professionals about my emotional instability. I needed new legal representation, but discovered 4 attorneys had already been consulted about the case by either Declan or Dr. Martinez. They couldn't take me on as a client due to potential conflicts. My insurance company sent a letter requiring pre-authorization for any mental health treatment going forward. They cited previous provider concerns about treatment compliance. The attached form referenced therapy sessions that hadn't even happened yet, future dates already documented as missed appointments. During Rosie's next pediatrician visit, the doctor mentioned receiving a clinical consultation about my emotional stability and its impact on Rosie's well-being. She asked gentle questions about our home life while examining Rosie, clearly fishing for concerning information. Even my daughter's medical care was being influenced. I sat in my car after that appointment, watching other mothers walk their children to their cars, and realized the terrifying truth. Every single professional in Rosie's life had been contacted. Teachers, doctors, counselors, coaches, everyone who might testify about my fitness as a mother had been systematically prepared to see me as unstable. The campaign against me was thorough, professional, and devastating. The isolation was complete. In less than a week since confronting Dr. Martinez, I'd lost my support system, my legal representation, my professional credibility, and my access to healthcare. Every avenue for help had been methodically closed off. The only therapist who would see me now was Dr. Martinez himself, and returning to him would validate everything he'd documented about my paranoid behavior. I thought about the other women who'd been through this, wondering how many had simply given up when faced with such systematic destruction. How many mothers had lost their children to this twisted operation? How many had been labeled crazy for trying to expose the truth? My phone buzzed with another text from Declan. He was requesting a modification to our custody agreement based on recent concerning developments. The attached documentation included professional opinions from people I'd never even met, all painting a picture of a woman spiraling into paranoid delusions. The hearing was set for 3 weeks away. I had evidence of the conspiracy, but using it would only prove I was exactly the unstable person Dr. Martinez had documented me to be. Every action I took to defend myself provided more ammunition for their case against me. It was a perfect trap, one that tightened the more I struggled against it. I started recording every interaction with Declan using my phone hidden in my pocket. During our next custody exchange, he used phrases about emotional dysregulation and therapeutic boundaries that he'd never known before. His eyes kept darting to my hands, checking if I was holding my phone. He knew I was recording him. The following morning, I discovered my therapy notes had been uploaded to Rosie's school portal as part of a collaborative care plan I'd never authorized. The school counselor had access to my most private thoughts, my deepest fears about motherhood, everything I'd told Dr. Martinez in confidence. The violation felt like being stripped naked in public. My research into Dr. Martinez's publications revealed something that made my hands shake. He'd published a paper on high conflict divorce dynamics that included case studies matching my situation exactly. Details about my childhood trauma, my mother's death, my specific triggers were all there, thinly veiled with changed names. I'd been a research subject, not a patient. Every session had been data collection for his academic work. I tried gathering more evidence, but Dr. Martinez had already documented my behavior patterns. My investigation attempts were logged as hypervigilant behavior consistent with paranoid processing. The more I tried to prove the conspiracy, the more I proved his diagnosis. It was a serpent eating its own tail. Declan started bringing his new girlfriend Catherine to custody exchanges. She introduced herself as a child psychologist specializing in family dynamics. She observed every interaction between Rosie and me, taking mental notes that would later appear in professional assessments. Her presence turned every hug, every goodbye into a performance being evaluated. When I requested mediation through the court system, the clerk informed me that Helen Martinez was the only available mediator for our district for the next 3 months. I could either accept her obvious bias or wait while Declan established a new status quo with increased custody time. The system had been rigged against me from every angle. I documented documented the conflict of interest and filed a formal complaint. The response came back dismissing my concerns as unfounded allegations against respected professionals. The dismissal letter used language that mirrored Dr. Martinez's notes about my paranoid ideation. Even the complaint process had been contaminated. Michelle called me late one night crying. She confessed she'd never been a victim at all. She was a graduate student in Dr. Martinez's research program, assigned to befriend me and observe my response to validation. Every supportive text, every shared story of abuse had been scripted. She'd been collecting data on my therapeutic resistance patterns. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Every person I'd found who claimed to share my experience had been planted. Dr. Martinez had created an entire fake support network to study how I'd respond to different stimuli. Michelle's script had included specific triggers designed to escalate my emotional responses. I'd been a lab rat in a maze, thinking I was finding my own way out. My evidence gathering shifted into dangerous territory. I started following Dr. Martinez, documenting his routines, trying to find something actionable, but he'd anticipated this too. He filed a professional concern report with the medical board, citing stalking behavior. My desperate attempts to expose him were being reframed as proof of my deteriorating mental state. The nursing board expedited my license review due to patient safety concerns. My supervisor called me into her office, showing me documentation from multiple sources questioning my fitness to practice. The same language appeared in every report, the same concerns about emotional instability affecting professional judgment. My career was being systematically destroyed. Catherine, Declan's girlfriend, submitted an expert opinion to the court stating that my behavior showed significant deterioration, requiring immediate intervention. She'd observed concerning patterns during custody exchanges, documented my hypervigilance, noted my recording attempts as evidence of paranoid behavior. Her credentials gave weight to every twisted observation. 3 weeks before the custody hearing, I faced the terrifying reality. Every piece of evidence I'd gathered proved the conspiracy existed, but it also proved I was exhibiting exactly the behaviors Dr. Martinez had predicted. My investigation had become a self-fulfilling prophecy. The truth and my credibility had become mutually exclusive. I spent hours in the library researching Dr. Martinez's family. What I found made my blood run cold. His father had been a prominent psychiatrist who'd treated my mother before her death. Old newspaper archives mentioned his innovative work on hereditary mental illness patterns. My mother's medical records, which I'd requested months ago, showed similar documentation of paranoid episodes. The records revealed my mother had made identical claims about her therapist before her sewers lied. She'd accused Dr. Martinez Sr. of sharing her information, of orchestrating her isolation. Her claims had been dismissed as paranoid delusions, evidence of her deteriorating mental state. The parallels to my situation were exact, as if following a script written decades ago. Dr. Martinez had inherited more than his father's practice. He'd inherited his research, his patient files, his multi-generational study on therapeutic resistance. My family had been tracked for decades. I'd been selected as a research subject before I was even born. My therapy predetermined to follow patterns established by my mother's treatment. Angela stopped returning my calls after I shared this discovery. When she finally answered, her voice was cold. She'd been contacted about her own children's welfare, threatened with psychological evaluation if she continued enabling my delusions. She had her own therapy history with Dr. Martinez, sessions I'd never known about. The web extended further than I'd imagined. My father confirmed my worst fears when I confronted him. He admitted my mother had exhibited identical behaviors before her death, making the same accusations about her therapist. His voice broke as he described how convinced she'd been, how real the conspiracy had seemed to her. To him, my behavior was genetic repetition, proof that mental illness ran in our family. Desperation drove me to cross legal boundaries. I installed hidden cameras in my apartment, recording Dr. Martinez during a home visit he'd scheduled to assess my living environment. I manipulated Catherine into revealing details about their consultation sessions by pretending to accept psychiatric treatment, recording her admissions about their coordinated approach. Every piece of evidence I obtained through deception was legally inadmissible and proved my willingness to violate boundaries. My methods undermined my message. Dr. Martinez had predicted this too, documented in his notes that I would escalate to illegal behavior when cornered. He'd scripted my downfall and I was playing my part perfectly. Declan's concern shifted from manufactured to genuine as my behavior became more erratic. He started limiting information, protecting details from both Dr. Martinez and me. His fear for Rosie's safety was real now, based on my actual actions rather than manipulated perceptions. I'd become the unstable mother they'd painted me as. My workplace placed me on administrative leave after colleagues reported increasingly erratic behavior. The suspension came with mandatory psychological evaluation, adding another layer to the documentation against me. Without income, legal fees drained my savings. The financial pressure compounded every other stress, exactly as designed. The breaking point came when I confronted Dr. Martinez at his home. I waited outside until his wife left, then rang the doorbell. His face showed no surprise when he opened the door. He'd been expecting me, had probably documented the likelihood of this confrontation. Every word I spoke, every accusation I made was recorded by his security system. The confrontation provided evidence of my deteriorating judgment, my violation of professional boundaries, my inability to respect appropriate limits. He didn't need to threaten or manipulate anymore. I was destroying myself more efficiently than he ever could. The camera captured my shaking hands, my raised voice, my desperate demands for him to admit what he'd done to my mother. Unable to pay rent after losing my income, I received an eviction notice. My landlord mentioned receiving concerned calls about tenant stability, questions about whether I posed a risk to other residents. Even my housing had been targeted. With nowhere else to go, I moved in with my father while Rosie stayed with Declan during what everyone called a temporary crisis period. Dr. Martinez made his final move with surgical precision. He offered to provide treatment for my genetic predisposition to paranoid ideation, promising it would help me maintain some custody of Rosie. The offer came through my father, who begged me to accept help. Everyone saw it as generous, a respected professional extending aid despite my harassment of him. Accepting his treatment was the only path to keeping any relationship with Rosie. Refusing would be documented as treatment resistance, proof that I prioritized my delusions over my daughter's well-being. He'd created a choice that wasn't a choice at all. Submit to the person who'd orchestrated my destruction or lose my daughter completely. I attempted to expose him through local media, but the journalist I contacted contacted called him for an expert opinion on my claims. Her questions during our interview revealed she'd already been briefed on my mental health history. The story she was writing wasn't about therapeutic abuse, but about a woman's descent into paranoia, with Dr. Martinez positioned as the professional trying to help. My father's health deteriorated from the stress. He had a minor heart episode that required hospitalization, providing Dr. Martinez with documentation that my behavior was harmful to family members. I faced another impossible choice: continue fighting and risk culling my father, or accept treatment to preserve what remained of my family. Rosie started asking why I didn't live with them anymore. During our supervised visits, she mentioned preferring Daddy's house where people didn't yell, where things were calm. She used therapeutic language about safe spaces and emotional regulation. My 5-year-old had been coached to see me as the source of instability in her life. The court-ordered psychological evaluation came next. The evaluator had trained under Dr. Martinez's supervision, though this wasn't disclosed until I'd already completed most sessions. Her assessment concluded I exhibited paranoid personality traits with genetic predisposition based on family history. Every action I'd taken to expose the conspiracy supported her diagnosis. The evaluation was technically accurate. I had followed Dr. Martinez, recorded people without consent, violated boundaries, exhibited hypervigilance, and demonstrated paranoid thinking patterns. That these behaviors were reactive to actual manipulation didn't matter. The clinical presentation matched the diagnosis regardless of cause. Court scheduling was delayed by 2 months based on the evaluator's recommendation for a stabilization period. The delay benefited Dr. Martinez's research timeline, allowing more data collection on my response to systematic pressure. I was still a research subject, my breakdown being carefully documented for academic purposes. The truth became clear through my forced therapy sessions. Dr. Martinez wasn't just treating patients. He was building a legal precedent. His research aimed to prove that challenging therapeutic authority was itself a symptom of mental illness. Every patient who questioned their treatment became evidence supporting his hypothesis. He was creating a framework where therapist judgment became unassailable. Any patient who accused their therapist of misconduct would be demonstrating the exact paranoid ideation that justified their treatment. It was a perfect circle of logic that protected therapeutic authority from any challenge. My choice crystallized into brutal simplicity: accept treatment for paranoid ideation I'd developed in response to actual persecution, or lose Rosie permanently. Fighting for truth meant sacrificing my daughter. Protecting my relationship with her meant validating lies about my mental state. I agreed to supervised visits with mandatory therapy attendance. Each session became a performance where I pretended to gain insight into my paranoid thinking. I discussed my genetic predisposition, acknowledged my mother's similar patterns, expressed gratitude for Dr. Martinez's patience with my resistance. Every word tasted like poison. My compliance became evidence in Dr. Martinez's published research about successful intervention in high-conflict cases. Academic journals praised his innovative approach to treatment-resistant patients. My case study, anonymized but recognizable to anyone who knew me, became teaching material for training other therapists. I discovered videos of our sessions were being used in continuing education courses. Therapists across the country learned to recognize and treat people like me, people who questioned therapeutic authority. My breakdown was teaching others how to create similar breakdowns in their resistant patients. Declan expressed genuine remorse during one exchange. He admitted feeling trapped between protecting Rosie and knowing something wasn't right about the situation, but he couldn't risk our daughter's stability to prove my point. His priority had to be her safety, even if that meant participating in something that felt wrong. The final realization was the cruelest. Fighting for truth had transformed me into exactly the unstable person I'd tried to prove I wasn't. Every action taken to expose the conspiracy had provided evidence supporting my diagnosis. I'd been scripted into madness, my resistance choreographed to appear as symptoms. I sat in my childhood bedroom at my father's house, surrounded by evidence that proved everything but condemned me in the process. The custody hearing was tomorrow, and I faced an impossible choice: accept Dr. Martinez's treatment plan and keep limited access to Rosie, or fight with evidence that would destroy any chance of seeing her again. My father knocked on the door, bringing dinner on a tray. His hands trembled as he set it down, and I noticed how much weight he'd lost since his heart episode. He sat on the edge of my bed, pulling out an envelope from his pocket. Inside was a letter he'd written but never sent, dated 20 years ago, right after my mother's death. The letter detailed his suspicions about Dr. Martinez Sr.'s role in my mother's sewer slide. He'd noticed the same patterns I was seeing now: the systematic isolation, the way her therapist had turned everyone against her. But he'd stayed silent to protect me from being labeled as genetically predisposed to her illness. His guilt had eaten at him for 2 decades. He showed me a safety deposit box key, explaining that my mother had hidden journals and recordings before her death. She'd documented everything, just as I had. The bank was closed until morning, hours after my custody hearing would begin. Another impossible timing, another choice between evidence and my daughter. That night, I made my decision. I would attend the hearing without the evidence, accept Dr. Martinez's treatment plan, and maintain supervised visits with Rosie. The truth would have to wait. My daughter needed a mother more than the world needed another exposed conspiracy. The courthouse was packed the next morning. Dr. Martinez sat with Declan's legal team, his presence a reminder of his control over the proceedings. Catherine testified about my concerning behaviors during exchanges, using clinical language that made my love for Rosie sound pathological. The judge nodded along, already convinced by the mountain of professional opinions. When my turn came to speak, I kept my voice steady. I acknowledged my recent struggles, expressed gratitude for the professional support being offered, and committed to following all treatment recommendations. Every word felt like swallowing glass, but I forced them out. Dr. Martinez's slight smile told me I was playing my part perfectly. The judge's ruling was swift: supervised visits twice a week, mandatory therapy with Dr. Martinez, and a review in 6 months. If I showed improvement, we could discuss gradual increases. If I resisted treatment or exhibited concerning behaviors, visits would be terminated. The gavel came down, sealing my fate.